Well, it's a brand new week. Welcome to Tuesday, 9th November 2021. And this is Good Morning Uganda on UBC, the national broadcaster. My name is Priscilla Nalwoga, and in the wake of this Tuesday morning, we get to see CNN having said that Uganda is the 5th best tourism destination in the world. More news coming through locally. We get to look at a story that is also developing where we do have intern doctors going on a sit-down strike yet again. Why? They're asking government to fulfill the pledge of the president, who said that he would move the salary scale from 750,000 shillings to 2.5 million shillings. And for now, they choose to sit down. We also do have doses that have so far been administered of COVID-19, now in the range of 3,483,212 doses that have been administered. Question is, are you among the 3 million or are you among the balance that we are waiting for? The good news is that education-wise, so many students are responding to the vaccination drives at the different universities and tertiary institutions. However, as if that's not enough, to the western side of Uganda, we do have Congolese that are coming into Uganda because of the political unrest on the other side of the country, and yet you get to see that our very own President Yoweri Museveni, he is at the helm of the Ethiopian conflict resolution. That's just around Uganda. But anyway, all this is part of our morning here on Good Morning Uganda. Joining me this morning is Felix Nkunda. Good morning to you, Felix.
Good morning, Priscilla. How are you?
I'm fantastic, slept like a baby, and I'm good. How are you?
Whoa. Wow. If I give you the interpretation of the word sleeping like a baby, you wouldn't. How babies sleep? Have you slept with a baby before?
You have
babies sleep like, you know how the clock is? Like, they're like this.
Or like this?
Like, no. Like,
oh.
When you start the night when they're like with their head next to you.
Okay.
By around midnight, they'll have the foot in your waist, and the time
okay.
it's around 5 and what? The kid will be in your shirt inside. So when you talk about sleeping like a baby, that's what counts.
No, as in I meant like I slept like without any interference. That's
like
what
a
I
clock.
meant. Yeah.
But anyway, how have you been?
I've been fantastic and very, very mesmerized by a certain story here that I was actually checking out last week while police was, implementing the curfew directives that we're supposed to be having. 7 o'clock, people should be in their house. The statistics of people that were arrested and cars that were impounded and borders that were impounded last week causes me to ask myself, there was a directive that the president gave in his last presidential address towards COVID-19 and unlocking of some sectors, and that was to come up with a fines fare that can be paid by everyone who's violating the COVID-19 regulations. But guess what? Just last week, 1,790 pedestrians were arrested. You do have 1,310 vehicles that were impounded on top of 3,487 borders. All that is being kept where all these vehicles and borders.
All that is money.
First of all, yes, that
not for government, by the way, just so you know.
What are you trying to say?
No, I mean, I know this. That is money for police. So clearly, it must have been a good week for them. Okay.
All right. But let's go back to that conversation. The Ministry of Finance was actually supposed to come up with a fines.
The pay scale for.
Scale, yes. And to this date, that has not yet appeared. One wonders why. Why do you think that has delayed?
Well, I think, you see, regulations must not be moment fixings. You get it? It's hard for you to regulate something that is just a fix. Like we can't make law or by orders or bylaws to fix a situation like this law will be in place for 2 months, 3 months, 1 week, 2 days. It's a bit hard. It's easiest to carry the spirit of law. So I think they're still struggling with that kind of framework. But also, with the kind of president we have, very modest and kind, and what you've had at some point, he says, forgive all the people you arrested. Well, I think it has a lot to do with the presidency. It must be from him to like, no, you leave these people, don't worry, take it easy on them and what and all that.
Let's look at it from the other end, that this would actually be making money for the finance ministry. If each one of these was to pay 1 million shillings, imagine how many millions of shillings are actually seated in police premises now.
If you put it off just the face of getting money from the people, there's also the other aspect of, do people actually even have this money? Most of the people who are caught off guard, you see most of them are trying to run home, some of them are just trying to, they break the laws, trying to get a calito, you know. So that's what I'm saying, it comes from the kind of president we have, who's very, very modest, and most times it comes off as forgiving and what and those kind of things.
Well, the purpose of the rule of the law is so that you can be in order. That is what the purpose is all about. So please ensure that you go by the directives that are there, put in place to manage COVID-19. Curfew is one of those.
Have you heard of the word human face?
Please do explain.
Yeah, sometimes in administrative policies, we must present a human face to some situations, even if we are right.
In some cases, other cases, we mustn't.
Definitely.
Exactly. So there's a time
and in this
for
particular case, in this particular, the many people who have been, by the way, taken to court. You've seen many people. For example, you see the punishment for people who are caught in bars is not the same for people who are caught in road, maybe walking home. So that's why I say it's relative. It's relative.
Okay. All right. Well, be on the right side of the law so that together we can actually fight against COVID-19. One would wonder where those people are. At least we've seen them back home in communities.
Definitely. So, I mean, where do you want them to be?
They haven't paid anything. Anyway, the power of also Gambanogu has greatly played its role.
People have Priscilla somewhere. Priscilla is a bailout person. They have the
Speaking
of this
of Kirabo, Robert Kirabo, get well soon. He's not with us this morning. He's under the weather, but he'll be back soon. Molen Kenyana is expected to join us later on. But we stride on, nevertheless, to kickstart your morning, starting off with the local stories. Minister for Science and Technology, Monica Musenero, yesterday launched the National Science Week at Kololo Independence Grounds, and the minister retaliated government commitment to support science-led innovations. President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni has always emphasized science and technology for the development of Uganda. This has given scientists and innovators morale to invent new technologies for the country's development. The 6 prioritized industrial chains being exhibited are pathogen economy, mobility economy, agro-security, beauty and apparel, engineering economy, and digital economy. President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni is expected to close the exhibition tomorrow, Wednesday, 10th November 2021, which will be the World Science Day for Peace and Development, which is something that is celebrated annually. In regards to security, Uganda police has released a portrait sketch of prime suspects in the recent Komamboga bomb attacks at Digida Pork Joint. The released sketches originate from the witnesses' testimony on the incident at Komamboga bomb attack, which claimed the life of a waiter while others were injured. Police links these portraits to the ongoing investigations on the crime gang being trained to destabilize the country. Police spokesperson Fred Enanga told the media that the training is conducted by these ADF-linked criminals. Similarly, police has summoned the chairman for the newly formed pressure group, Dr. Kiza Besije, and Mitiana Municipality Legislator Frank Zake over violent utterances. In another development, the Directorate of Criminal Intelligence has unveiled the trail which led to the arrest of NUP's Secretary for Mobilization in Eastern Uganda, Moses Bijirwa, in connection to fraud and enforcement of curfew. In last week's operations, police arrested 1,790 pedestrians, impounded 1,310 motor vehicles and 3,487 motorcycles. Some were released on caution, while others still under court process, with several vehicles and motorcycles still at different police stations due to lack of proper documentation by purported owners. Forum for Democratic Change wants government to reduce the charges that public should pay while using Entebbe Express Highway. Addressing journalists at FDC headquarters in Nyonyintono, the party deputy spokesperson John Chikonyogo was dissatisfied with Entebbe Express Highway road toll system. He urged government to reduce the charges if it's to recover the money used on the construction, which, according to the party, are not affordable to ordinary citizens. However, the party also appeals to government that they gradually plan to reopen fully, to also mind about lifting curfew hours to allow people, especially in the markets, finish up with work. And finally, on our local stories recap, leaders in Central Business Center are the reason why prices of commodities have hiked because of some complacency of putting up policies that actually bite. NUP spokesperson Joel Senyonyi thinks if there was cooperation among the leaders in Kampala, prices of commodities would favor the ordinary Ugandan. Days back, prices of cooking oil, matoke, tomatoes, among other commodities, got hiked. The spokesperson for NUP, Joel Senyonyi, has attributed this to bad leadership and structures. Senyonyi also dismissed allegations that they are planning demonstrations, as police had earlier indicated in their statement. They also demand an immediate and unconditional release of their colleagues who were arrested a week ago, and also grant bail to Mohamed Segrinya and Alan Sewanyana, saying the health of the MPs should be priority than remanding them. Turning our pages to the international stories.
Now in our first story, we'll be looking at Poland blocks hundreds of migrants at Belarus border. Now Poland says it has repelled attempts by migrants to enter the country as it at its eastern border with Belarus, warning that thousands more were on the way. Now video footage showed hundreds of people near a border were fenced, with some trying to forcefully enter their territory. Now, Polish government called a crisis meeting on Monday and deployed at least 12,000 troops to the region. Now, Poland has accused Belarus of pushing the migrants towards the border, describing it as a hostile activity. Now, still about international stories, Obama calls out China and Russia for dangerous lack of urgency at the COP26. Former U.S. President Barack Obama lambasted those who would play politics to avoid acting on climate change, calling out Russia and China in the same breath as Republican politicians back home. Now, it was particularly discouraging to see these leaders of two world's largest emitters, China and Russia, decline to even attend the proceedings. In Glasgow, Obama said their national plans so far reflect what appears to be a dangerous lack of urgency and willingness to maintain the status quo on the part of the governments, and it's shame. Democratic former president, speaking on the main stage at the COP26 climate summit, also took an aim at domestic lawmakers from the Republican Party. Obama said both he and the current Democratic President Joe Biden had been constrained in large parts by the fact that one of our two major parties has decided not only to sit on the sidelines but express active hostility towards climate science and make climate change a partisan issue. Now back to Africa, we were looking at Sierra Leone tank explosion mass burial in Freetown. At least 115 people killed in Friday's massive fuel tank explosion in Sierra Leone are being buried in a mass ceremony in the capital, Freetown. Many of the dead were burnt beyond recognition after fuel leak before catching fire at a busy junction. Now, the authorities have also made an urgent appeal to blood donation to treat more than 100 burn victims admitted in the hospital. Officials say that blood supplies might run out in the next 72 hours. Those being buried on Monday will be laid to rest in the same cemetery as some of those who died in 2017 mudslides that killed some 1,000 people in the city, says the local journalist, that is Umaru Fafona. Well, clearly much is also happening on the international scene, and sad stories there, mostly the one of Sierra Leone. You can imagine losing at least 115 people in one well, it's very sad, and it does bring much. But of course, much is also happening, as Priscilla did say, on African continent. Like we did see a story that where we see His Excellency the President called on to be the mediator in the crisis in Ethiopia, and of course more stories coming in from Sudan in relation to the same. Nevertheless, we also want to put to you our poll question today, where we want you to give us your true thoughts on the same and what can be done to reduce the unending floods in the city. And this is backed by the fact that we are in a rainy season and every day it rains. Truly, as a matter of fact, some of you can't access the town center because of the various places that actually flood. So what can be done by either communities or government to reduce the unending floods in the city? Now, be able to hit our social media platforms on Twitter, hashtag UBCGMU, WhatsApp 070960 2592.
All right, thank you so much, Felix Nkunda. As we continue with Good Morning Uganda this Tuesday morning, we do have very interesting things coming up. In our 7 o'clock hour, we are going to be talking about the increased cases of mob justice that shouldn't be, but are the case most recently and are affecting those in the line of duty, especially security agencies. But we're also losing lives. Must we lose a life all because we want to serve justice in our own hands? Well, it's a matter of discussion elsewhere. Of course, our Good Morning Uganda agenda is still intact and ready for you at exactly 8 a.m. 8 a.m. o'clock will also be closed with our sports update coming in from Ruben Pimach-Birango, who's going to be talking about France World Cup qualifiers and how we do have Pogba out of the French team. However, on the other side, we also get to look at the inaugural CAF Women's Champions League, and it's taking its second day of action today, continuing all those and more in our sports update with Ruben Pimach-Birango. For now, we take a breather, leave you with the song of the day, and see you in our 7 o'clock hour. It's still Good Morning Uganda.
Introducing the all-new Roofing's TMX 500C rebars with cut and bend surfaces. Roofing's, strength of a nation.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Good morning to you once again. It's Tuesday, 9th November 2021, and welcome to Good Morning Uganda. My name is Priscilla Nalwoga alongside Felix Nkunda for this Tuesday morning. We step into another hour where we get to look at our newsreel. But before we introduce to you our newsreel, we would like to have a recap of our poll question this morning.
And that will be what can be done to reduce the unending floods in the city. Be able to also answer that and giving us what you think your communities can do, what government can do, your cities and your formal leadership in terms of reducing what's happening most recently as we are in the rainy season. Okay.
Thank you so much, Felix Nkunda. And now we turn our eyes to tackling increased cases of mob justice in Uganda. Just in the year 2021, we have seen rampant stories of mob justice, people taking matters into their own hands and deciding the fate of another, which is affecting human rights at the end of the day. But looking at mob justice, it's not only criminal, but it is also amounting to a violation of human rights. And according to the Uganda Police Forces, between 2013 and 2019, if we are to look at the annual criminal reports, you do have 746 deaths that were courtesy of mob justice action reported in 2019 compared to 2013, where we did have 426 cases reported, which gives you a rapid increase of 75% in mob justice, which is not a figure we want to pride in. Looking at the most interesting story recently of border riders who actually took justice into their own hands and killed a motor vehicleist, and that was according to Kampala Metropolitan Deputy Police spokesperson Luke Owesejire, saying that Bashir Aziz, who was 40 years of age, a former United Nations driver, was involved in an altercation with a border rider who had crashed his motor vehicle, and then thereafter he failed to agree with the motor rider. Two motorcyclists shielded the rider who had been involved in the minor accident, and they were trying to pursue Bashir. At the end of the day, Bashir ended up knocking another motorcycle rider, and these all rounded him up and they ended up beating him to death. He lost his life because of that altercation, and so many other stories that we're going to be bringing highlight to. But one would wonder, what is mob justice and what are the various causes of mob justice, especially here in Uganda, Felix?
Well, when one talks about mob justice, it does bring into context an unbecoming behavior where mobs or numbers of people cling onto uncertain reasons or certain reasons by them to qualify punishment that is also put in line of violence. And such may result into death, like the case you just gave us. And in other times, it can result into disability, like the many so have been. But also, most cases have permanent injuries. So it is basically where we see mobs taking justice in their own hands. They want to make definition of justice as they want it to be executed. If you have stolen from someone, they think the best punishment is to burn you alive, burn you, all this. So it's basically mob justice is an act of, in an orderly manner, people causing what they seem to call justice. That's why it's mob justice. To them it is justice, yet it does defeat the due process. In a nutshell, it could be that.
And why are we having these rising cases of mob justice in such a time as this?
Well, when you see mob justice taking place in localities, it is a reflection of very many things. And among them, you would want to look at the kind of nature, like one, the absence of good laws. That could be the starting point. And good laws in terms of community and even the enforcers of the law. If I may use an example of what happens in most of the localities. When I was growing up in the suburbs of Kampala, we used to see this very rampant. In fact, in a month, you would hear of not less than 3 people who are burnt or beaten to death or lynched for that matter. In fact, lately it has reduced greatly. If you remember 10, 15 years ago, it was the order of the day. But what was the major cause then, or even still today that still is carried on, is sometimes the manifested unprofessionalism of our security agencies in the various ways. For example, one, the weaknesses in investigations, the weaknesses in upholding the law and the enforcement of the same. But also later on it brings into context an institution of prisons. You know? When institutions don't actually carry out their work, the people will definitely carry out their work. The mobs feel betrayed by these institutions. If a person is arrested for, let's say, defilement, and just a month after the person is in community, you end up finding the mobs feeling that the institutions which should be doing what they should do are not actually doing it. But also, some of these are responses to fear. Like the case I've given of defilement. Let's imagine Mr. X defiled someone in community and he's back in the community. There's fear by these people. What if he defiles another person? But also remember, because they have taken the right procedure and nothing has been done, you will be surprised that they are worried to take the same procedure again.
For some of you who didn't get a chance to see that video, that's the video that is running on our screens, showing you border riders taking mob justice into their hands and beating up that vehicle, the person, Bashir, who was inside the vehicle. They pulled him out and beat him thoroughly until his life was normal. Please continue.
Yeah, so when we talk about all these things, just to take back to this, like what you see in this car, it's a reflection of anger. But now you see amidst that someone is stealing something. You get it? It's a reflection of anger, it's a reflection of pain, it's a reflection of grief, it's a reflection of so many things. However, it all starts somewhere. Once there are systems in place, Priscilla, you know as a matter of fact that what needs to be done will definitely be done.
Okay.
For example, what are the procedures of recording a case at police? Is it an easy thing? When you do record the case, do investigations commence immediately?
Is it an
do we
easy
see
thing?
expeditious?
You would have to go to the police station, the nearest one of that.
Okay.
And they may end up referring you to another station because of the manner of your case, not being able to. It can be registered at the post, but then referred to a bigger one for
probably because they don't have the machinery to investigate or what. But now all those are part of the contributors. You see, once people don't feel safe, and this even happens in homes, like in the setup of a home, once your team doesn't feel safe with you, they start to act in different ways. Like imagine if every time you have sisters or brothers, and when they do something, you report them to your mother. Priscilla atuvuma. Carry. Then mom does nothing. Second time, third time. The fourth time, you'll see this other kid starting to take his things in his own way. So the next time he come back, they'll be reporting that, Priscilla will be the one reporting that Felix Nkunda. Because when we come, you actually don't. But the habit is continuing. Now, it makes us to think that, are we harboring? Or two things, either we are part of it, or we are harboring, or we are condoning that kind of behavior. Okay. So, primarily, the causes have a relationship with security organizations, and majorly the police and the prisons. And the procedure, and therefore delay in procedure. All those cases. Well, it does make sense when we look at a massacre incident that also had mob justice recently in October, actually, where you did have Reverend Father Mugisha Richard, who is the parish priest for Busanje Catholic Church. There was a gentleman, Nyonyintono Ronald, 30 years of age, who wanted to steal his car at night, in the middle of the night. And so the gentleman gets into the car, but then people within the community get to realize that he was stealing the car. They round off the car and they start lynching him. This very reverend ends up calling police, but the police stands up 1.5 hours later. Good enough, he didn't lose his life, but he was, brutally wounded because of the mob justice that was implemented upon him by the people in the community. However, of course, at the end of the day, he ended up losing his life, and guess what? Police stand that death and tied it to the Reverend Father instead of the mob justice, and they ended up arresting Father and the quote unquote, he's the one who actually caused the killing of this young man. So this is an indication that delayed responses from the security institutions that are supposed to be doing this in time, 1.5 hours later, is a lot of time that is given to make room for mob justice. So then again, it begs the question, how can we revert this delay in response to action? And yet, ironically, for an ordinary person, it takes this long. If it was a political affair, it would take a shorter time. Which is a bigger threat. So where do we fail? Which is a bigger threat. We saw one of the reasons in Massacre, actually, Greater Massacre region with the Bijambia stories, was the fact that they didn't have enough human resource on ground. Police, different police posts did not have enough human resource to be able to manage all these parts that were facing the insecurity in Massacre. Yeah, but the question would be, well, you wouldn't want to relate political activities to mob justice. You may lose it, because where does the butter fall? There's more butter than the bread in terms of that. But I know that police has challenges that we acknowledge. It's going through a couple of challenges in terms of manpower. Doesn't have enough funding. That's a matter of fact. Look at and that explains its absence on ground. You have seen places where you hardly have a police post. In remote areas. Rural areas. Because the manpower, that's one. Secondly, its funding is still so low. So low. Is there a possibility that the manpower that is extended to different regions is in direct relation with activities? The threats. Yes. Yeah, the security threats in those particular regions. You may, because deployment must be relative. How you deploy Kampala is not the same how you deploy Kiliandongo, or how you deploy a border area is not how you may have to deploy a city center. So it's relative. But I think there's need for sensitization. There's need for sensitization above all this. Even in Uganda, we used to have some sayings. Like, for example, when a Nalwoga stole, it would be excusable. It would be somehow related to the kind of burden they have in terms of raising kids and all this. And so many others. But I'm not saying we condone this, but we must have sensitization mostly and majorly to the crowds. For example, this gentleman who was killed, couldn't this have been done better? Even when there are the laws, where various laws, sometimes there are those things that come before the laws, like our emotional intelligence. Now, we have all been on the road and we have been scratched, knocked and what, but emotional intelligence is key. And now, this is not something that you want to blame government for. Like when you see border borders leeching someone, what comes into your mind? Are we having the right people on the road? If you want to shift, you may shift the question now to them that, okay, you who are beating up, who qualified you to be on the road? Do you have the right people qualified? Because in the first incident, you're having an accident. Couldn't this be avoidable? I think in this case, you may find that the problem may not be actually the mob justice per se, but the kind of people we are having on the roads. Are they qualified to be on the roads? How many times do you see someone driving a car?
But you see, they're qualified to be on the road. And earlier yourself, you stated that one of the brooding effects or reasons as to why we have mob justice is anger. Now, anger is not really about qualification.
No. But it is. It's one of the things we go through when you're learning how to drive. That's why I talked about emotional intelligence. You have been knocked before on the road. Have I been knocked? Did you fight everyone who knocked you?
No,
Did you knock them again?
My incident was in Kirabo. They knocked me, scratched me, a very big dent on the car, and I drove off because I knew stay here,
when you start,
it's going to take long,
that's
and
the
then
thing.
Whose side is it going to be on, blah, blah, blah. Let me bear my own burden.
Simple. Not that it's okay for you to be knocked and what, but again, do we have the right people on the road? And why I say this, and you see that the border community is one of the most unruly community in this country in terms of abusing road users, in terms of abusing road signs, in terms of abusing traffic jam. They drive in flowers, pavements, they're almost driving over other people's cars, they're almost driving through people's. So the question is the problem actually, well, like in this particular case, is the problem the road users or a particular group of people? That's why I brought in the question, do we have the right people in this border job? Who evaluates who goes in the road? Or all you need is just to buy a border. So this is just a small sample of what we can be heading for in that particular industry. It is a very good industry, but because it is unregulated, it has nobody who's in charge of it. It has no place of report. Like when let's say a road user, let's say if you want to report a taxi driver, you know where to go. They have organizations, they have all these other taxi drivers, conductors, but where are these other people? So for us to reduce, and this we are going to see again, or actually we see it happens, it's probably not on camera like this one, but we see border people. We have had myself, I've had an incident here at Queensway. Guy, just one person, and all of them gang on. You start shouting, they stoned the car. I've had a client who almost lost a life there at night. Even past a few hours, you can imagine.
Okay.
So, as we think about this whole thing of mob justice, we must think on how we can regulate this team of workers.
All right. Mob justice in Uganda and communities taking matters into their own hands. It is depicting the lack of faith in the judicial process. How do we then use such things to be able to improve on the judicial process so that mob justice can be reduced, or people can have more faith in going through the proper channels to deal with injustice?
Well, first and foremost, the judicial process is not necessarily under the premise of the judiciary as people may think. The judicial process is basically a representation of what one would call the quest for justice. It entails various players. Nevertheless, you could call them primary and secondary. And in this case, you may have at the beacon of them is the judicial officers who may be judges or legal personnel or what. But far also from the same is that the police is key. The judiciary or the judicial officer simply only looks at what they have before them and probably slightly beyond what is the unseen, depending on what they have has been submitted only. So we shall judge a judicial officer according to the kind of investigation or the reports that they are given. However, that notwithstanding, there are challenges of corruption continuously. These thieves, we see their categories of offenders. We have people who offend in misdemeanors and of course felonies. Now most times felonies, because of the gravity of some, few times do they get away with it. But these misdemeanors, there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of abuse of process. And that's why you will notice that over time, when people do abuse these processes, it creates anger in the mob. As I said earlier. No. How? And these stories, by the way, are real. I remember there are so many programs that used to run on different TV stations. One that used to be done by a veteran journalist, one Drake Sekeba. I think he used to have a very nice program where he used to tell us all these things. And when he went to committees, people would tell you, Yatagundi, aitawo mwezi netumulaba, ategundi nabula. Now, because of these systems, it also defeats the purpose of witnesses. People are scared to come and give evidence because they know, before you know these people are back in communities. So when you talk about the judicial system, they have something to do, but the judicial thread entirely, starting from the investigators, going to the judicial officers, but also at the end of it, the prisons. When people are taken to prisons, do they actually stay in prison? Do they serve their sentences as being given by the courts? Or some of them run away? Either with collusion. Or they
simply condition their minds, we're here for a certain period of time, let's dig, eat posho, sleep,
and go back and start from where we stopped.
Our date of release.
But that would also mean...
It doesn't really change anything.
Exactly. That what is the rehabilitation, implementation in these prisons? Do we have the motive to rehabilitate these people, or it's just keeping them and making them to work? Because the intention for people being incarcerated is clearly that. It's punitive, but also rehabilitation.
Okay.
So I think for me, we must reconsider those two approaches, or rather the various approaches for us to be able to remedy mob justice. But as of now, mob justice is one of the, because, and something you didn't say, we forgot to say, is that many a times, mob justice is actually put on innocent people. There are many cases we have had, innocent people. One time in Wakaliga, when we were young people, they killed a man who was not innocent because he resembled someone who had stolen and run. One kept on telling them, but now in Bedawali. And before they knew,
a life is lost.
So, because there's no time for investigating, there's no time for questioning, there's no time for what. So, I think we need to fight this vice.
Okay, speaking of fighting the vice, police has been challenged in actually eliminating mob justice, and there's some few challenges that they face. One of them is poor crime and operational information management, poor resource management, inadequate manpower, inadequate funding, inadequate logistics, poor remuneration, inadequate knowledge on human rights, and inadequate analysis and publication of criminal statistics. Those are some of the challenges that these security agencies face in administering solutions to mob justice. But then again, we cannot keep looking at the challenges. How do we move forward? Or how can these security institutions be empowered to actually manage these better and cut down the statistics from 75%?
I think the first thing for us to do, Priscilla, is to first and foremost sensitize people the dangers of mob justice. One of the dangers that we never get to know or to get the witnessing of these people. In case it was a racket of thieves, you may not know who the rest are. So by killing this person without going through a process with police and what, it limits on investigations. Secondly, we may kill innocent people. You know, out of this now, look at this scenario of the car guy, the border issue and the car person. The man was killed, but honestly and truly, he was innocent. Oh,
it was really a matter that could have been handled
in a very different way.
In a very modest manner.
Definitely.
Yes.
So, that aside, but also, for us to avoid some of these cases to reoccur, we must equip the coercive force, and in particular the police. You know, we are asking for too much from police. I have noticed over time, and we are asking for too much, and we are giving them so little. I want you to know that in fact, they are doing extremely over and above the bar. They don't have enough manpower because they have small budgets. You know, you look at in terms of professionalism, do we have enough money to train them to the point where we want them? How? You're talking about response. Do locomotives, like, do they have cars? Do the cars have fuel? That's the question. How is their presence in these other localities? The priest talked about taking 1.5 hours, but maybe they were driving from another place and all this and what.
Or maybe they had to first help from another
or maybe they had to first wait for the car. I've had a scenario somewhere in Mukono, I think around Kayunga, and they basically told me, and I could see, told me the only car we had here went to help people. I think they had a corpse that was decaying somewhere, and so we have to wait to go and make a rescue. But the word was a rescue. Now, is it still a rescue after 3 hours? You understand? The challenge is, we need to have logistical increase in terms of what we give to police. We need to increase these people's budget. It may look as big, but they need more and more manpower, but also logistics. For example, airtime, these radio calls, even training, because we have challenges in investigations. Thirdly, we must have, and this comes back to us as communities and later works down to families, we must teach people a great deal of emotional intelligence. A great deal of emotional intelligence. I'll give you an example. Imagine you have power without emotional intelligence.
You would misuse your power.
And power is relative. Anyone can have power depending on their position. Anyone has power, even as long as at that point they're the ones
in charge.
Yes. So these guys had the power then to simply tell the man, no, let's go to the police and sort this at the police.
But because of emotional intelligence,
because they had the power
to take
and they had the absence of emotional intelligence, that's what they would do. Now, that comes to us as individuals. Communities. What are the things we pride in? People will do this, and for us growing up, as you'd hear them, and that is something that someone is proud to say. Emotional intelligence. You get it? So that's something we must practice as families and as communities. Where do we stop with our anger? When do we act? When shouldn't we? Sometimes I have always told people, or I've also learned the hard way, that sometimes walking away is the best win. Walking away. And just like the Baganda used to say that, some of these sayings were working towards some of these things, that you must create well your emotional intelligence. But lastly, let the institutions that are meant to work. When people are arrested, let them be taken through the right procedure of punishment, sentenced and all that. That will help also, because people must, this will help build confidence. Once people are confident that take this person to police. But the real opposite is the truth. So let's build confidence from the institutions that are meant to help with the judicial processes also.
Well, at the end of the day, mob justice in Uganda does reflect reduction of the public's trust in the criminal justice system in Uganda. Now, this leaves a lot to be reflected on, not only by security agencies, but also communities. How are you raising the next generation? The kind of society that we live in, does it make room? Because mob justice is really a secondary repercussion. It probably starts with bullying when they're younger. They were probably the gangs or simple abuses, within the communities, and it's not addressed. And then
they have a right over other people.
Exactly.
When you say something bad, they can beat you, and it's okay.
And it's okay. No one tells them anything.
And these are the same things. They reflect the level of domestic violence. That's how, again, emotional intelligence.
Everyone.
If Priscilla annoys me, I have a right to slap them, to beat them, because I have a right, and you can get away with it. Emotional intelligence. How better can we do? Same things we can handle. And this is for us as parents. It's very, very key. How do we teach our children great deals of emotional intelligence? And that will also be one of the factors for their success in life.
What's your emotional intelligence? Well, you can go to the internet and get a survey that can help you actually assess your emotional intelligence, know where you stand, and know exactly what you need to work on. Uganda. But anyway, we come to a closure of this conversation. Just to give you a recap of our poll question this morning, which we desire that you give us your opinion and your 2 cents about.
What can be done to reduce the unending floods in the city? And again, depending on how most recent we are in the rainy season. So the expectation is that whenever it rains, there is so much flooding. For some of you who stay in the sides of Chireka Banda, some of you who stay on Entebbe Road, Namasuba, there, Bata, you know what happens. The side of Chebando, Bwaise, you know that sometimes you can hardly get yourselves into the beautiful city. So what can be done rather to reduce on some of these unending floods? Okay.
Glenn Rice says, good morning, Uganda. The issue of flooding speaks directly to improper waste disposal. The drainage channels are visibly clogged with most commonly used plastic bottles, polythene bags, etc. that make it impossible for smooth drainage to happen. We all have a role to play here. Well, thank you so much, Glenn Rice. Others are responding, and we shall be checking out your responses later on. For now, we get to look at the black and white in the newspapers this morning. A traffic update coming up, closing this hour with weather, nature and climate. And then we'll be able to continue on with Good Morning Uganda, but do stay with us.
Kagalino twalekedde ekyatulese tuzze tukalanga enfunda eziwererako ddala. Eno ye Go TV Super ey'abakaguje njagala weekaanyi ewatali kwemamaaza olwo tuba tusimbudde ne Go TV Super Duper waawawa era nga bakutuusyako ekigo eky'abakabejja abasajja eŋŋwaŋŋuli kw'ogatta ne busineema obujjudde omuhabati ku $5,015 waawawa. Soka Blaza weefunye ekirungo kya Go TV Super ekijjudde obulungi ove mu baaje.
After bringing Kigali to its knees on energy shift to Nairobi, nothing brings out the true picture of a football derby like the Mijingo Derby. It's a derby that leaves many desiring for more. And oh yes, this is the time that the question that is frequently asked will be answered. If you own the water, we own the land. And all this will be sorted out on the 11th of November 2021 at the St. Mary's Stadium in Chitende. Join us live on UBC TV free to air and radios as we bring you action after action as the two bulls fight and we sit back and relax at the comfort of our homes. UBC TV and radios, your home of sports.
Grow together with one of Uganda's largest companies. Apply for MTN shares for as low as 100,000 Uganda shillings. And when you apply using MTN Mobile Money, you get 10 free extra shares for every 100 shares you apply for. Dial *165*65# or use the MyMTN app to apply now. The terms and conditions of the offer and other important information are set out in the prospectus. For assistance, visit any MTN service center or Stanbic Bank branch countrywide or a licensed broker.
Talk of the Day on UBC. Brought to you by
how to get points. Just use MTN to make calls, send SMS, load airtime, buy bundles, or pay for MTN subscription services.
Everywhere you go, MTN.
Well, now in the Daily Monitor, we'll be looking at some of the headlines here where we see the big one, New Congo war floods Uganda with refugees. And of course, we see North Kivu province exploded in heavy night fights. That was the other night. And we see here a photo of people. The lightning night attack by M23 rebels were, according to highly placed security forces, prompted by the failure to fulfill the terms of the 2013 pact, and now risks delaying Ugandan planned Uganda-DR Congo road works. We see here a picture of rebel refugees carrying, they never also left their livestock behind. But also, Dr. Oledo, the new doctor's president and suspect shot dead during arrest, and the effect of terror attacks on the economy. Now inside the papers, Winnie and Muhoozi clash. Also, Bart Katurebe, retired Chief Justice, will spend part of his time retirement mediating disputes among litigants. Also from the archives, we see the then President Idi Amin Center slashes the compound of Jinja Municipal City offices in 1975. Now today in history, Christ the King Church Choir turns 50, and anti-war protesters set himself ablaze. That is in 1965. And of course, from
at the big story, parents arrested for marrying off underage girls. And of course, the black and white has Congolese flee to Uganda after rebel attacks. On the side, we get to see Museveni directs RDCs on security, pass A-level mathematics, chemistry, plus senior one biology. Government needs 5.7 billion shillings to pay legal fees. And tribute this morning, they get to pay tribute to business community mourning Mansour Alam. In the deep of the New Vision this morning, World AIDS Day, which will be celebrated on December 1st, they bring you how to use a condom. The facts about HIV, how effective are condoms in preventing HIV, and of course COVID-19 tracker, which gives you updates on Uganda. New confirmed cases 55, positivity rate 1%, new deaths we only have registered 1, which brings our death toll to 3,228 people that have so far died. But they give you health tips: wash your hands, maintain social distancing, and avoid touching yourself before washing your hands. The figures in 2020, they give you 84% in 2020 of people living with HIV knew their HIV status, and more statistics there. Today in history, November 9th, 1974, Asian Ugandan citizens asked to identify themselves. And also the same day in 2000, Mpaka sworn in for second term as Tanzanian president.
Now in sports, in the Daily Monitor, in form, Mugabe boosts Uganda cranes. Well, we see Mugabe's rise breaking Ronaldo's record, and also Khalifa out of extent Uganda dominance. Now also English Premier League, Moyes Reds, David Moyes West Ham hand Liverpool first defeat of the season and move to third place in the same. Now of course they give you a breakdown on how various teams are playing and of course standing. Now tough World Cup group list for Tawi's concern, and Queen's Baton teases up Uganda for Birmingham games. Now Uganda plot Sekafa glory as well.
And in the New Vision Sports this Tuesday, we get to look at all insider, all soccer results, she cranes on new battlefront, Who will score? That is the FIFA World Cup qualifiers, a Thursday game, Uganda versus Kenya. And New Vision does bring you a series on Mandela, second of 5-part series, Why I Left Sevilla.
Now in the Daily Nation, of course, we see Ruto's date with Destiny DP could be kicked out of Jubilee on November 30th during the NDC, that's the National Delegates Conference. Now missing, I'm here, and Will says that is Mudavadi as rumors spread. But also the big headline, the high cost of indiscipline. Wow, we see Parents Association say 35 schools have been affected by fires these terms, and the term rather. And of course, they give you reasons as to why and the breakdown of the same, the report of what has been destroyed in terms of material. And of course, now a kidnapped lawyer turns and refuses to discuss his ordeal. Well, that's basically much what is in the papers. And of course, for you to get more of some of these stories, get yourself copies of the papers. You'll be able to tell what's happening outside of the confines of what you have in your hands. Now, Priscilla is also ready on the other side to take us through what is happening on the roads and how we can get ourselves to this beautiful city today.
Whoa. Speaking of beautiful, there's a very beautiful hotel in Namave Industrial Park that is known as the Kampala Nile Resort. Make time and drive by over the weekend. You will be blown away, or even you'll think you're out of this country because of how artistic it is in nature, but more so what they get to offer you there. But for Namave Industrial Park, adjacent to the Kampala Ginger Highway, you get to see that we don't have so much jam as expected from the industrial area, where you do have a lot of investment. You do have a lot of stores and a lot of branches and industries and companies that have gotten settlement within this industrial park. We get to then move to the Kampala Ginger Highway connection route of Roofings Road, still from the Bwegere Industrial Area Road, which is the back route that people alternatively can use in case the Kampala Ginger Highway directly has traffic jam. Now, speaking of traffic jam, around the National Forestry Authority in Namave this morning and African Queen Limited, you are experiencing a heavy flow of traffic jam, red lines on either side of traffic coming in from Kono heading into Bwegere Chidakabanda. You do have a lot of traffic coming in there. Equally, traffic coming in from Bwegere passing through the Namave area code getting to Mukono is also dense right now, meaning that the alternative for you to use to avoid the traffic is maybe go through the industrial park and be able to connect to the Bwegere Industrial Area Road, and that is going to be able to bring you out from Bwegere directly at the railway line. If we can follow the Bwegere Industrial Area Road, we get to see that then it gets us to avoid the traffic jam and brings us right out at Joker's Hotel in Bwegere. Then you can be able to connect to Nambole National Stadium. Either you go up, depending on again where exactly you are, but this is definitely an alternative route. It has recently been kind of worked on, so it makes traffic easier or more manageable rather than going through the cumbersome traffic expected on the Bwegere Namave into Mukono. But speaking of Bwegere, this morning, surprisingly, we don't seem to be seeing any major traffic issues within the trading center at Bwegere. Only for the traffic that is coming in en route Nambole Stadium and trying to connect to Bwegere and connecting to Kampala Ginger Highway, it's not a problem. However, it's only the traffic that is trying to connect back to Bwegere Trading Center, where you do have a build-up of traffic there. Also, Chove Road is bringing in traffic that is trying to connect to the main route here, which is indicated there. But away from the trading center, traffic on either side away from the trading center, Bwegere into Namave is clear, and as well as Bwegere back into Chireka is equally clear. Now, if we are to just have a round look at what the traffic is looking like on either side, main route and back route, Main route is clear, that is going past the Kampala Northern Highway. However, the challenge is that the potholes are cumbersome, even though KCCA is committing to deal with 70 kilometers of road repairs in this season. Hopefully this is one of the areas that are being considered, because the traffic jam that is people would rather go around the Nambole National Stadium than use the direct route, simply because of the deadly sinking potholes there. So they would rather enjoy the traffic jam that we are seeing down of Nambole National Stadium and be able to get into the heart of the city. Now, this red zone, interestingly, is all coming in from Bweregere, meaning that people would rather use this as an alternative route than go through the clear direct route. You get to see that this traffic then connects you into Chireka. You can connect to Chireka Road just directly, avoiding the trading center traffic that would be experienced if you were to come out at Sportsview Hotel, and therefore you can still continue into Chireka to be able to avoid the Chireka Trading Center traffic jam that can equally also cost you time and money of about 40 minutes to an hour in just that locality. So if you use the down route, which is Chireka, connects you to Chireka Road, this will throw into Chaliwajala. That would be a good option. However, because everyone is using this particular route in the morning right about this time, where you do have 27 minutes to 8 a.m., meaning that the main route is clear. The irony of it is that if you ever see traffic jam in an alternative route, that simply means that the main route is now clear. So my advice would be that people who are coming in from Bweregere, please stick to the main route, and that way you may arrive faster than people who are going through Chireka Road right now, or this morning for that matter. In comparison to the Kampala Jinja Highway adjacent to Chireka Road, and you can clearly see the red lines are continuing on for Chireka Road, whereas there is orange lines for the main route heading into Banda. And of course, you do have traffic that is coming in from the likes of Chambogo. People that are coming in from Tinda will use this as an alternative route to get onto this side of Kampala through Chambogo into Banda, and that is definitely causing traffic for people that are trying to connect into the main route at the trading center there. But then adjacent to it, if we stick to Chireka Road, then it shows you an entry into Chinawataka area, and then that gives you an entry into the likes of Mbuya. But if we stick to the main route still this morning, Chambogo Road is also giving you indications of traffic that is coming in from residentials in Chambogo and Tinda, especially in Ministerial Village. They will use this as an alternative route, which gives them access to Nakawa area code, but again, that access comes with a lot of traffic jam. Chambogo Road itself has quite a number of potholes there, which slows down the jam. Sticking to the main route, which then brings us into Spear Motors this morning. Spear Motors does have traffic coming in from Chinawataka. It has traffic coming in from Tinda. It has traffic coming in from Bweregere, Shekabanda. Of course, this being a trade route, obviously, but you also have traffic that is coming in from Jini Road, Nakawa, and all interfacing at the crossroad here. Surprisingly, they put traffic lights, but the traffic lights are not functioning. I wonder why. There would have been a better option of managing the traffic jam, but you do have the police officers there every single morning, committed to managing the traffic flow. Obviously, around Spear Motors, for the traffic coming into the heart of the city, expect 2 to 3 lines of traffic entering into the heart of the city around Spear Motors, which affects the flow of traffic interfacing with the main route, especially from Nakawa and also Chinawataka area codes. But away from that, getting into Nakawa and its trading center this morning, you get to see that the traffic jam you will experience is only limited to the Nakawa traffic lights, where you do have the road heading to Moobs around Total. That's the only place that you will be experiencing traffic jam right now. The rest of the trading center is clear for you to use. Katalima Road is also okay for people coming in from Naguru and Tinda and wanting to use Katalima Road as an access route into Nakawa. It's okay for you to use as an access route this morning into the area code of Lugogo, where you do have quite a number of businesses and shopping malls. There's not not so much indications of traffic. It's actually a clear route. Now that also depicts that there's traffic somewhere else in an alternative route. Please note that Chireka Road will then drop you into the likes of Bugolobi, and people will use Bugolobi to enter into the heart of the city. Speaking of which, Old Port Bell Road bringing in traffic to the Airtel roundabout this morning on Ginger Road, and so the roundabout is very busy as we speak. Red lines for traffic coming in from Kampala traffic lights. Then you do have traffic coming in from Wampel Avenue. Lots of people these days use the Centenary Lane that comes from Oasis, connects through Centenary Park and connects you to Wampel to be able to avoid the traffic lights jam on Ginger Road. A lot of traffic that is being stopped coming in from Nakawa simply because of the interaction of the roundabout there. However, you do have just minimal traffic building up to the Airtel roundabout from Bugolobi, and yet a long stretch of traffic being indicated moving from the Airtel roundabout into Bugolobi. Obviously, because of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and people making long lines this morning to ensure that they get their passports, and into the heart of the city where you do have Kitugumu House. The traffic jam there on the lights is manageable. Mukwano area code is having a lot of traffic, obviously, from Mukwano Road into the industrial area. You also do have red zones that are appearing on the Oasis roundabout, connecting you either to Yusuf Lude or Nile Avenue this morning. And speaking of which, Nile Avenue is also having an indication of traffic, a busy area code this morning, especially with the interaction for the roundabout and traffic that uses Nile Avenue from Oasis to connect to Ginger Road, just so they can avoid this traffic jam here and be able to connect either into the downside of Kampala or connect into the main route, which would be Kampala Road. So those are some of the traffic updates that you are going to be experiencing this morning all the way from Namamve. In response to a poll question, someone did say, good morning, my family. The problem of flooding in the city will be history if Uganda was a corruption-free state. Okay, and I'll leave it at that. Another response here, issue of floods, those constructing it wetlands should stop, because water will always flow where it's used to flow. Then the others who are not in the wetlands should be able to do what is necessary. And someone else says, thank you for the advice. Well, you're most welcome. Here on Good Morning Uganda, we want to say thank you so much for choosing UBC and always waking up to Good Morning Uganda. We do not take your company for granted, but we do remind you that we want you fully vaccinated. So if you do have your first jab, kudos to you. But if you haven't yet gotten your first jab, please go to the nearest health center and make sure that you get your vaccine. But also, we continuously echo this: do not mix your first dose and the second dose. If you got Pfizer for your first dose, make sure that you go with your card and it indicates Pfizer, and make sure that you get Pfizer. If a health worker gives you a challenge, you have a right to protest, because this is your health. You're not allowed to mix vaccines. So let's be very vigilant about that. But for now, we continue to wear our masks and hide our smiles, but nevertheless, we continue to social distance and ensure that we keep all the other COVID-19 guidelines, such as being at home by 7 p.m. But we are going to be returning with Good Morning Uganda agenda this morning, and the rest of the show is going to continue on as promised.
This is Good Morning Uganda.
The Uganda Cranes national football team soars higher yet again to qualify for the much-anticipated World Cup in Qatar 2022 with a game against Kenya. Support our boys from the comfort of your home with friends and family as Uganda takes on